And so keep that in mind, but we'll be happy to, if you see something that sparks your interest or curiosity and want to ask a question about it, we'll be happy to do that. I think we're going to go ahead and ask that you put questions in the chat or remember them and ask them at the end. We'll leave enough time at the end to handle questions. So we're going to try to sort of burn through this quickly and hopefully provide all the information that might help you either decide whether you want to apply or in putting together your grant proposal. So just going over the training overview and our agenda for this afternoon, we're going to start by giving you a quick background on the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program, the purpose of the program, how it's managed, funding sources. Some people have asked about funding sources and been curious about that, so we'll go over that very quickly. And then speaking of quickly, Silvana has some quick facts and a summary of the 2024 multi-state awards that are currently active. They were proposals we received last year and then awarded for the 2024 calendar year. There was one other thing. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. You'll hear me refer to the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program as Multistate or MSCGP. So those are the acronyms that you're going to hear us repeat throughout. The second part of the training will go over the 2025 multi-state process. And again, you're applying in 2024 for potentially getting an award that will be active in and awarded for the calendar year 2025. We're going to go over eligibility in terms of applicants, activities, projects, species. We'll talk about all things eligibility. We'll talk about elements of the grant proposal. We'll go over the specific requirements for the project statement, things that we look for, things that the people who are reviewing your applications will be looking for. We'll go over the budget requirements and tips for working on your budget. We'll then also go over the application review process, who's looking at your application and the timeline associated with that. And then finally, we're going to provide you with some resources that you can reference as applicants. And again, we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. Okay, so the purpose of the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program is to fund projects that address regional or national priority needs of state fish and wildlife agencies and their partners. These are projects that are beyond the scale, scope, and capabilities of a single state and are relevant to many states. We'll go over the definition of what many means in the context of multi-state, but suffice it to say that the importance of this project is that it's a cost-effective way to addressing issues that states have in common. Just a little bit of history. Again, with these slides that have a lot of text on them, I'm not going to be reading through every single one. They're there for your reference once you receive the slide deck. The Multi-State Conservation Grant Program was established in 2000 under the Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program Improvement Act. Many people are familiar with what might be referred to as the Improvement Act. That act amended the Wildlife Restoration Act and the Sport Fish Restoration Act to include the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program. It authorized up to $3 million from wildlife restoration funds and $3 million from sport fish restoration funds for multi-state conservation grant projects. In 2019, the Modernizing Pittman-Robertson Fund for Tomorrow's Need Act, or what we sometimes call the Modernization Act, authorized an additional $5 million under the multi-state program specifically for hunter and recreational target shooter recruitment. In total, there is $11 million available annually for these projects. The other thing I want to point out on this slide is in bullet 2, you see where I reference T-MSCGP. That's for traditional multi-state conservation grant program. Those are projects that have traditionally been funded under wildlife restoration and sport fish restoration, whether they were research and surveys or hunter education or R3 type projects. Under the R3 MSCGP That R3 money is, again, just dedicated to hunter and recreational target shooter recruitment projects. R3 projects for angler recruitment, retention and reactivation are funded under the traditional sport fish multi-state funding. And I know that can be a little bit confusing, but I think it plays itself out and it makes more sense if you're not familiar with the project as we go through the slides. Okay, again, this is one that I'm going to breeze through. We have one slide to show you where the Wildlife Restoration Act funding comes from, and one where the Sport Fish Restoration Act funding comes from. In the case of wildlife restoration, it's excise taxes paid by the manufacturers of these items. That funding is then distributed to different accounts. And again, as I referenced, traditional multi-state under wildlife restoration gets $3 million, and $5 million goes to R3 multi-state projects for R3. So there's $8 million there under wildlife restoration, and then there's an additional $3 million available under sport fish restoration for multi-state conservation, both R3 and your traditional sport fish restoration projects. The excise tax comes from these items that, again, is distributed to all these accounts, and you're welcome to kind of dive into that at another time. We're going to breeze on by that. Now I'm going to hand the presentation over to Silvana, and she is going to cover some additional facts about the multi-state program.
So as Karen mentioned, this is like really unique program compared to like other competitive grant programs within U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's co-managed by Fish and Wildlife Service and AFWA. So just to have an idea what each of them do and where you go for questions or if you have any like feedback. So AFWA starts with updating the strategic priorities. Once the strategic priorities have been approved, Fish and Wildlife Service will post the NOFO, which is the Notice of Funding Opportunities. And under that NOFO, AFWA will request for full grant proposals. In the meantime, AFWA is the one that is in charge of selecting the proposals in consultation with all the partners. Once this priority list of proposals is finalized, that goes to the Fish and Wildlife Service by October 1st. And then Fish and Wildlife Service is in charge of reviewing, approving, awarding the grants, and then everything that follow after that, the monitoring and financial aspects and everything else. Okay, Karen. Just a few quick facts about the multi-state grants in the last 24 years. Since the inception, about over 600 grants have been awarded. That adds up to about $160 million. We approve about 45 to 55 grants a year since 2020 when we got this extra funding from the R3 Modernization Act. The grants range between $50,000 and $1 million. Another unique feature of this program is that it's 100% federal funds, no matching or cost sharing required. The performance period is only 1 year. There are few exceptions where we will approve the multi-year funding, but these are very rare. And we will go over those criteria a little. Those criteria actually are like posted in the AFWA website. We'll go over that. I'll show you where to find those when we talk about the resources. This is just like to give an idea of where the funding went last year based on the priorities. For the 2024, as you can see, that big orange piece is the R3 grants, and the rest of them are the traditional one and based on the other on the 4 priorities. If you move to the right side, this is only the R3 grants, and this is just shows what went where based on the R3 priorities. You can see a big chunk went to the marketing, followed by R3 access and infrastructure, and then engaging participants in marketing. before we all start and look into putting together those applications, I'd suggest it's a good idea to go and check out this website. This is a new site that was launched last year, and it's very helpful. You have all the information that is related to grants that were awarded from 2001 till 2024. This is going to help you a lot. See if there is like any grants that is already approved for 2024, and you don't want to like duplicate. There's a good place to go and get some ideas and see what things needs updated. It's very helpful. It's very easy to find things, very friendly used. Okay, Karen. And we will just continue to talk about the application requirements and the process. So these are some of the resources that you will find useful to look at for eligibility, allowable costs, and application content. There is the first document you're going to refer to is the Notice of Funding Opportunities. Really read careful through all the sections. All the information is there. 2 CFR 200 is a huge help. The AFWA Multi-State Conservation Grant Program website has a lot of information. Everything is there. When we get to the resources, you'll see you can go find the guidelines. You can find the templates you're going to need, the budget templates, and all the information required for you to apply. Before we start writing that proposal, it's good to look and check the eligibility requirements, because if you don't check all those boxes, you're just wasting your time. So there are a few eligibility requirements for the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program. You start with the applicants. It's only for only states or group of states, nonprofit organizations, public institution of higher education, and I have to reinforce here, public, not private, and Fish and Wildlife Service to carry out the National Survey of Fishing, Hunting, and Wildlife Associated Recreation. The project must benefit at least 26 states, majority of the states in the Fish and Wildlife Service regions, or the majority of states in the AFWA regional associations. Also, it has to address one of the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program strategic priorities for the year. It has to be species and activity eligible. And also, the project must be on the priority list of the project that AFWA sends to the Fish and Wildlife Service to be approved. And as we speak about the strategic priorities, we go through a process to review and update those every year. I don't think this is a place where we need to go into details here. The 5 strategic priorities for this year, and these are the main priorities: conservation and science, capacity building, conservation education, and coordination of conservation policies, the engagement, relevancy, and expanding engagement and relevancy, the AFWA priorities, and then we have the R3 priorities. As I mentioned, these are just like the main one, and then those go into like subcategories. The document that has all the strategic priorities for the 2025 gives like, it's very elaborated. It has definitions for each priority and sub. Also, it gives you, it's really easy and guides you so you can address the right priority with your application. Moving to you, Karen.
Okay, I'm back up. Okay, so specifically talking about species eligibility, The purpose of proposed projects must benefit the following. If you're requesting funds under the Multistate Wildlife Restoration Funds, then your project must benefit indigenous or natural species of wild birds or mammals. That's it. If you're requesting multi-state sportfish restoration funds, then the definition for sportfish is aquatic gill-breathing vertebrates with paired fins having marine or freshwater recreational values. So we're not talking about shellfish, which some people have asked about. Now, when I say the project must benefit those species as defined, that doesn't mean that seemingly, I think, please make sure you're all muted. Thanks. That doesn't mean that otherwise ineligible species may not be part of your project. So other species may be eligible if the project's need, stated purpose, results, and benefits focus on how these otherwise ineligible species directly impact conservation of wild birds or mammals or sport fish. The examples I'll give are invasive, if your project focuses on invasive species, food resources, habitats, disease projects, those are eligible as long as the proposal demonstrates that the whole purpose of the project and the reason you're conducting the project is to improve conservation for wild birds or mammals or sport fish. What I'm going to show here is an actual example, though somewhat paraphrased. This is an example, and just in the title alone, where it reads, developing eDNA tools for use in aquatic invasive species detection to improve conservation efforts for sport fish and waterfowl. That's the title. Now, the abstract, the need, the purpose go on to explain the link, why it's important that we develop a cost-effective rapid detection tool for aquatic invasive plants in order to improve management and conservation for sport fish, waterfowl, and waterfowl. In terms of what activities are eligible, activities that carry out the purposes of the Wildlife Restoration Act or the Sportfish Restoration Act. The purposes of those acts are conservation, restoration, management, and enhancement of wild birds and mammals and sport fish, and providing for public use and benefit from those resources. What I would say is there are project examples using traditional multi-state funds that include research on various wildlife populations or sport fish populations, looking into contaminants, diseases, invasive species impacts, or even human dimension surveys and understanding attitudes towards those species or our management of them. There are projects that have proposed development of models, databases, and various forms of technology that help states better carry out conservation and management of those species, and training and best practices for conservation and management. Really, these activity requirements can be overlaid with the strategic priorities that Silvana mentioned. So it's important to think about both of those concepts. Looking at the strategic priorities, there's plenty of detail there to give you ideas and suggestions for what characterizes the priority in terms of project proposal focus or activities. Same with project examples using R3 multi-state funds, whether it's R3 under wildlife restoration for hunting and shooting sports, or if it is R3 under sport fish restoration. There have been projects that conduct research on barriers, attitudes, participation, effectiveness, and marketing. There are actual marketing projects involving social media, mentoring, creating templates, photo and video collections that states can use, or maybe the whole country can use, various toolkits, training and course development related to R3, and on-the-ground participation through program development and holding events that cover large geographic areas. So we often get questions about education, outreach, and communication, and even construction activities under multi-state. Under the Wildlife Restoration Act, education and outreach are limited to educating responsible hunters and archers in skills and knowledge and developing responsible attitudes. R3, outreach, communication, events, and marketing are eligible. Projects under traditional wildlife restoration and sport fish restoration, projects that inform, translate, or otherwise offer technical assistance directly in support of funded findings or accomplishments of projects funded by the Wildlife Restoration Act. So not general wildlife outreach and education projects. They have to be tied to what states are already funding and learning under the project that they're funding through the Wildlife Restoration Act. Under sport fish restoration, education, outreach, communication, it can involve enhancing the public's understanding of water resources, aquatic life forms, and of course, sport fishing. And developing responsible attitudes toward the aquatic environment. And of course, as I've mentioned a couple of times, R3 is eligible under traditional Sport Fish Restoration Act funds for multi-state. As far as construction activities go, we have not those activities have not historically been funded under multi-state because it's very difficult to demonstrate a benefit to 26 or more states or half the states in a U.S. Fish and Wildlife region or a regional association of fish and wildlife agencies. To build a building or one boat ramp or one fishing pier isn't going to meet the eligibility standards. So you really have to consider all of the eligibility elements and criteria to determine if your proposed project and the activities that it may contain are potentially eligible to be funded. So keep that in mind. Activities that are, I would say, outright ineligible are public relations to promote a state fish and wildlife agency. You can't just start a marketing campaign to say how great the work state fish and wildlife agencies are doing. Again, that work, the general conservation, education, or wildlife work needs to focus on accomplishments that are funded by the Wildlife Restoration or Sport Fish Restoration Act. Law enforcement activities are not eligible. Establishment, publication, and dissemination of regulations are not eligible except when they're done to directly support R3 and to remove barriers to participation. You cannot produce revenue as the primary purpose of your project. That includes all processes and procedures directly related to the issuance of hunting and fishing licenses or associated permits. And you can't, well, I'll just leave it at that. If any of these things are generating questions for you, please contact me and I will help walk you through it. And finally, just promoting opposition to regulated taking of fishing, regulated taking of fish or hunting and trapping, also not eligible. And finally, wildlife damage control activities are not eligible. Savannah, I'm going to turn it back over to you to talk about timeline and process. You're muted.
Yep, of course. This is a general timeline we have, and this is the same every cycle, unless we change something in the process, which happens once in a very long time. I'll follow with the timeline for this year, so I'm not going to go through every single little square in this one, but just to make you aware that if you are wondering in this year, like what's going to be like in 2026, this is the timeline again for that. Let's move to the next one. So the process timeline for this year, I'm sure you all have had already a look on that. This is in the AFWA website. The deadline for the grants, for the proposals is June 7th. So June 7th, 11:59 p.m. That's it. You enter the proposals and you are done. June 10 to 27, AFWA will review the proposals for the eligibility. And then we have the review teams, which are going to spend about a month to review the proposals, score, and rank those. In September, we send those proposals to the, in August, we send those proposals to the OCI, the Office of Conservation Investment, and National Grant Committee for review. The applicants will be notified in the beginning of September if they made it or didn't make it. And if they made it, they'll be asked to update their proposals if there are major changes before they resubmit for the final approval by the National Grants Committee. The final priority list will be approved at the AFWA annual meeting during the business meeting where all directors vote in that priority list. October 1st, the priority list will be sent to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And after that, Fish and Wildlife Service will take over reviewing and awarding those proposals. Another thing will be that sometime in September, the proposals will be needed to be entered in the grant solutions as well. And we'll talk about all those in the next slides.
Silvana, did you want to mention the portal? I'm not sure if the Apple portal.
Yeah, the June 7th, there will be submitted in the AFWA portal, which is the SurveyMonkey Apply. Everybody has the link for that site. It's in the guidelines. It's in the website. It's really friendly. It's really easy to use. Once you create, it would look like something like that when you open the page. And then once you create the account, you will see the programs. If you ever have a problem with like logging in or trying to create an account or how to start, please just like email me or call me and I'll walk you through there. We don't have time to walk through like every single step of that side, but it's really easy. We haven't had issues with this before. And then the grant solutions is the one we use. We don't enter any grants in the grant solutions in June 7th. So that's after you have been, if you made it through the first priority list. So what are the first part of the grant proposal, which will be submitted on June 7th, will include the project narrative, which is like that template that is in the AFWA website, and we'll go through that in the next slides. The qualifications for the key personnel, 1 to 2 paragraphs per person, and then there will be a budget narrative and budget table. Different from the other years, if you applied before for the multi-state grants, this year we're going to try to keep separate the narrative from the budget template. So that's just to make it easier if there is like little errors in one of them, we don't have to change everything. So, and the part 2, which will be submitted September 15, will be the project narrative, the project abstract, the applications, the federal forms, which are all in the grant solutions, they will be completed online. And if you have a negotiated indirect cost agreement, that will be requested as well. And then the required statements, there is a template that is like available in the AFWA website.
Okay, so as Silvana said, the first thing that's going to be due in the AFWA portal is your grant proposal and of course budget. I'm going to first start with the grant proposal piece and walk you through that, and then we're going to go over what goes in the budget narrative and budget table. So AFWA developed grant proposal guidelines that provide detailed instructions. You're going to want to use those detailed instructions along with the notice of funding opportunity to complete a blank grant proposal template, also available on AFWA's website. The grant proposal itself is comprised of applicant and project information in the header part, and then your project statement, which serves as essentially the meat of your proposal and where you're going to describe the activities that you're going to conduct. So just follow along as we walk through and highlight sections of the grant proposal. So this is the version, version that includes instructions. This stuff will all be blank in the template, so you'll fill it in. The one thing I want to mention is you want to have a descriptive title, but we've seen descriptive titles that look more like abstracts. They're so long. So please keep your title brief but descriptive. Also, we have the grant start date is going to be January 2025 for those who are awarded grants. The end dates are generally going to be December 31st, 2025. Silvana touched upon multi-year, which is a possibility. So if you're in that category, you're going to want to do some additional legwork on AFWA's website and perhaps reaching out to us to talk to us about what that means. For the project abstract summary at the top of the grant proposal, a couple of things to note. This abstract summary, if your project is funded, if it's awarded, this abstract will appear on usafunding.gov. It will appear on the AFWA website, Multistate website, and will also appear on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service partner with the payer Multistate website. So it will be publicly available. There are components in the abstract we want you to address. These are best management practices for writing an abstract, and it needs to be limited to 4,000 characters because that's all grant solutions, if you get to that stage, will allow. Finally, at the top, well, not finally, there's more, but at the top of the grant proposal, there is a place to identify your primary principal investigator and your primary authorizing official. Just those two names. They could be the same person. Best practices that they're not. You may have a fiscal officer that's your authorizing officer, but at any rate, just put two names there. Save all the other key personnel that are involved for further down in the project narrative, and I'll show you where that is. These are people generally that are going to have access to grant solutions if your project's awarded. All right, so in terms of the background information on your proposal, there's an eligibility section. So you're going to identify the type of applicant you are, the type of organization you are, rather. So you're going to pick one of these. We don't care how you do it. If you just type it out yourself, delete the rest, these are all on the template. So highlight, choose one, but only one. Same with beneficiary information. Does your project benefit at least 26 states, or are there regional benefits? Just choose one of these. Getting behind my animation there. And the final section of the background information in your proposal identifies your strategic priorities. So pick one strategic priority that you're going to be addressing. There are subcategories under those strategic priorities, and we say one only because the AFWA system, when you go to apply in the portal, it only allows you to select one. You could list others here, but there's going to be one that's primarily assigned to your project because it's associated with the technical review team that's going to review your application. For eligibility, again, this is us just asking you to be mindful of whether you meet the eligibility standards for activities and species. That information can be found in the full grant proposal guidelines, and you can also or within the guidelines, you can refer to sections 4 eligibility standard and section 5 definitions to inform your response. And then finally, you're going to identify the type of multi-state conservation grant funds that you're requesting. You'll also do this in your budget table, which we'll show you at the end. So just running through the project statement portion of the grant proposal, there are 9 sections in the project statement. I don't remember if Silvana mentioned it, but TRACS, if you're familiar with TRACS, is no longer used for multi-state grants. So I'm not going to be showing you the TRACS template that those who applied last year may remember. So again, this is the template that, these are the instructions for the template. The template will be blank. We don't want you to include the instructions in your proposal. We want to focus on what you have to say. So what we encourage is that you use the notice of funding opportunity and this 2-page instruction document, say on 2 screens or 1 screen, and then put your template on the other, and use this as a guide, best management practices, so to speak, for how to fill out each one of the 9 sections in your proposal. Beginning with the need and purpose section of the project statement, you're going to identify in the need the conservation issue, problem, or opportunity that your project will focus on and resolve. We want you to be clear and concise. There is no page limit on the project statement, but we do keep in mind with the number of proposals that the review teams are going to have to read, you want to make your case as clearly and concisely as possible. Your purpose statement. A word about purpose statements. In the past, I've seen a lot of purpose statements that basically just restate the need, they restate the objectives and the methods and approach. That's not what the purpose statement is for. The purpose statement is to very briefly and concisely describe the desired outcome of your proposed project. We've provided an example here. This follows on that theme of the aquatic invasive species and sport fish and waterfowl. But again, read the instructions do provide advice on what should be included in the purpose statement. Under objectives and approach. So your proposal may have one objective and approach, or it may have several objectives. If there are several objectives, each objective should have its own approach section. The objectives should each be written as specific, measurable, achievable, and time-bound within the grant period. And of course, they should be relevant to the project's need, purpose, and the eligibility criteria. Your approach section for each objective should provide detailed descriptions of techniques and methods that will be used to accomplish the objective. I mean, that's pretty straightforward and common sense, but this is not a place to put 2 sentences. This is a place to, as I always say, use your words. You're talking to people that are not familiar with the project. They can't read what you're thinking. They can't read your mind. So put those words on paper and help us understand exactly how you're going to carry out the work that will meet the objective. And then the other important thing to remember, if field work is a part of your proposal and a part of your approach, make sure you're identifying specific locations where you'll conduct field work, the timing of when field work will be conducted, and any details regarding exactly what you'll be doing, whether you're collecting samples from live animals or capturing wildlife to take measurements, or collecting water or vegetation samples. Those things are important because we have to think about compliance under Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, Section 106 under the National Historic Preservation Act, and under the National Environmental Policy Act. So we need those details. Of course, if you're doing an office project or a workshop or conference or training, that level of detail, I'm really talking about the field work, is when we need that level of detail. The results and benefits that are expected, yes, some of this could mirror what's in your purpose statement because it's focused on the intended results if your objectives are complete and the need is resolved. But we also in this section want you to address how the benefits that you're proposing will continue after the project is ended. We don't want it to just die and go away. We need to know that the use of grant funds will have a life beyond your project. Section 6 of the project statement addresses deliverables. You need to describe the deliverables that will be produced under your project. Examples include designed reports, peer-reviewed publications, photos and video collections, marketing templates and toolkits, presentations, workshops, and webinars that are probably recorded, and others. We want to know not only what those things are, but where they will live. You will be required to submit copies of all deliverables and products created or obtained using grant funds to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service upon project completion. And that's even if the products produced for your deliverable are not selected for use in the deliverable. So if you're taking photos, a bunch of photos and photo collections, or you have B-roll video, those are things that you will need to submit to the service upon completion of your project. We're not talking a lot in this training about what happens after if your grant is awarded, but this is one thing that I will take every opportunity to remind folks about if you have a grant award, and that is all deliverables must include the acknowledgement statement provided with the grant's notice of award. So you will receive this statement and these logos, which should appear on any deliverables that you're producing as a result of the grant funds you received. Timeline, Section 7 of the project statement. A timeline helps reviewers determine whether the project objectives and the approaches are realistic for the grant period that you're proposing, in most cases 1 year. So we want you to identify the timeframes within which key project tasks or milestones and other activities will be carried out. A timeline may be presented as a chart, a bulleted list, or a table. And section 8 that follows timeline is really describing to us how you will monitor and evaluate your project's progress according to the proposed timeline, so that you're not falling behind or the project doesn't get neglected. It's important to evaluate your project because it'll help ensure that the funds are being used as intended and that milestones during that 1-year period are being met. One final thing, post-award, if you receive an award, we don't want you to wait to let us know about significant developments. If there is a problem with how something is proceeding, we need to know that right away. If there's a reason why you may find yourself in a position of needing an extension, you're going to have to justify that and demonstrate the need for an extension. If something is going wrong and it's not coming out the way you expected, those lines of communication to me, to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are open. Please reach out, call, email, as Silvana said, so that we can talk about what happens next. Don't wait till the grant ended and you're explaining these problems in your report. That's not going to go over well. Okay, and finally, in the project statement, as we mentioned, qualifications of key personnel. This is the place to talk about other people who have a key role in the project beyond just the principal investigator. Providing this information demonstrates your readiness and your ability to complete the proposed project. So describe those qualifications, but limit the description to 1 to 2 paragraphs per person in the project statement. Okay, so that was the grant proposal, which was the background project information and the project statement. That's one document. The second document that you're going to submit to Apple by June 7th is your budget information. The budget information can be provided to us in a template that we're recommending you use. The template available on APWA's Multistate website is comprised of the budget narrative and a budget table. It's all one document. You can also, like the project statement, the grant proposal, consult with APWA's grant proposal guidelines for detailed instructions on how to fill out the budget narrative and the budget table. As always, consult the notice of funding opportunity as well. So in terms of the budget document will provide information that demonstrates that your project is cost effective and that the proposed costs are necessary and reasonable to accomplish your proposed objectives. This is what the reviewers are going to be looking at. So don't hold back on that information. That's what we're looking for. We have to have sufficient information to come to that conclusion. Provide cost estimates for each budget category in the budget table. I'm going to go over the budget categories. Provide a description of the costs that are in your budget table in the budget narrative. Explain the relationship between the budget category cost estimates and the objectives and approaches in your proposal. That's what you'll do in the budget narrative. Be sure also in your budget narrative to include information for costs that require prior approval. If you're not familiar with what prior approval is, please visit 2 CFR 200, 308, and especially 407 provides a list of items that require prior approval. The items that are most relevant to multi-state that we see most often are salary and fringe, travel, contracts, subawards, and participant support costs. You may also have third-party in-kind contributions, but then again, match isn't required for multi-state, so we don't really expect to see that. Program income is not very common in multi-state, but if you are generating revenue as a result of your grant funding, that is something that needs to be reported. Well, it needs to be proposed as part of your project statement in your budget narrative. Program income would be in cases, for example, if you propose to hold a conference or a workshop and then you may be charging a nominal fee for registration or you're receiving sponsorships for that event. Those are funds raised as a result of your work being supported by grant funds, and those need to be identified as program income and handled as program income. And I'm not going to get into those details here, but would be happy to help if that arises. And then, of course, indirect costs, which we'll get into. Just a brief overview of allowable costs that are described under 2 CFR 200 and applicable to all federal awards. Your allowable costs need to be consistent with policies and procedures for both the federal government and your organization. Federal grants are not a place to circumvent your organization's policies. In other words, trying to use federal funds to pay for something or something in a way that your organization would not normally allow. Key things to remember, again, just repeating that we're going to be looking for costs that are necessary and reasonable. In other words, if you're traveling maybe to a conference and you're taking staff to a conference, you can pay for airfare for those staff, but you can't buy a Humvee because that's not necessary or reasonable. You can't include costs in your budget that are already being paid for out of another federal grant program. If you're familiar with the old Seinfeld episode, when you take a chip, just take one and end it. No double dipping. Your costs need to be adequately documented. So through the course of an awarded project, keep records of your costs on file. And of course, costs need to be incurred during the approved budget or performance period of the grant. You can pay invoices in a certain period of time after the grant ends for services performed before the grant end date, but you cannot perform or pay for services after the grant end date and charge those to the grant. Now, when you're filling out your budget narrative template, much like the proposal or the project statement, you have a set of instructions that we're providing or best management practices for filling this out. And you also have your notice of funding opportunity. Use those resources. What I would say is we hope that you will use the template. If you do, we do not want you to delete any of these categories. If any of these categories do not apply to you, simply write not applicable or NA. The problem is sometimes in project statements, we see an applicant describing that they're going to be attending or participating in conferences or workshops or training, and they don't have anything listed under travel. So it makes us wonder, did they forget to include travel costs, or are they paying for travel costs out of another fund? So again, in the sort of the theme of use your words, help us understand what's going on. You can add, if you're using the template, you can certainly add categories if there's something here that's not represented that you feel like you need to describe or that falls under allowable cost that's not included on the template. If it's allowable, you can add it to the template. Okay. All right, so just going through the budget categories, personnel, this is where you're gonna describe the salaries and wages for each employee performing, your organization employee performing work on the proposed project. You're estimating percent of time for each employee, and you're briefly describing the role of those employees on the project. Why is their time necessary and reasonable to accomplish the project objectives? For fringe benefits associated with those employees, you're going to identify your fringe rate. That rate's going to be in your budget table also. But you're going to describe what's included in the rate. Most organizations have this information, so it might be something you need to talk to your finance staff about, but you'll describe that in the budget narrative under fringe benefits. Under the travel budget category, the travel category is for travel costs associated with employees of the organization working on the proposed project. If part of your proposal and your budget is to pay for partners or others to attend workshops or training, then those travel costs are part of participant support costs and go under the other, literally the other budget category, not here. This is for your organization employees' travel costs. Describe the purpose of the travel and how travel supports your project objectives. Identify specific meetings or events that you're traveling to, the number of employees attending and their roles in attending whatever it is they're traveling to. Are they presenting, leading, facilitating? We're not asking for another layer of paragraphs of explanation. Simply just identify we have employees that are presenting, leading, facilitating, whatever it is. Provide a breakdown of estimated costs. This is just an estimate. We know these costs are going to change. That's what budgets are for. They're estimates. However, they do form the basis of an award amount. So you want to get them as close to possible, but you want to explain them to us. If you just put $10,000 down for travel costs, we don't know how you arrived at that figure, and we can't determine whether it's necessary or reasonable. That's why we ask for that detail. And again, we're not asking you to put tables upon tables. You can put it in sentence narrative form, in a bulleted list, however, whatever's easiest for you in the budget narrative. Equipment, I'm going to use the paraphrase definition of equipment: having a useful life of greater than 1 year and a per unit acquisition cost greater than or equal to $5,000, or the dollar amount for equipment that's established by your organization, whichever is less. So if your organization says equipment is $3,000, then you're going to put equipment on the equipment line, and your estimated cost, and you'll describe to us why a $3,000 piece of equipment was included there. Describe how each piece of equipment that you're proposing supports the budget objectives, and also review other important information in the grant proposal guidelines regarding equipment details, things like telecommunications and drones or unmanned aerial vehicles. There are specific restrictions on those, so you need to consult with those guidelines if those items are part of your proposal. As an example of this, if you were doing, say, an aquaculture research project maybe, and needed to buy multiple tanks, and each tank cost $1,000, and you were buying 6 tanks, that's $6,000 total, but each tank only costs $1,000. So that is a supply, not equipment. However, if it's a rather large tank or other equipment that one of those pieces costs $6,000, then it is equipment. So follow those guidelines, and if you have questions, let us know. Again, just to touch upon supplies, those are items other than those described as equipment. And you want to list in the narrative types of supplies you need. You don't have to list every pencil and pen, but if you're buying supplies for a conference, or if you're buying supplies for an R3 archery program, list those out. Tell us how many you're going to buy, maybe a unit cost. We're not asking you to provide excruciating detail, but you have to give us some sense of whether what you're proposing is reasonable within normal market rates. Okay, so the next budget category is contracts, but I'm going to take a moment here and address this issue of contractors versus subrecipients, also referred to as contract versus subaward. Those are the terms you see. And this is a topic that has created some confusion, and it is a topic of interest to auditors. It is covered in 2 CFR 200, so it's part of the larger uniform guidance for federal awards. It's not just related to multi-state, but all federal awards. So you need to be aware of your responsibility in determining the difference between a subrecipient and a contractor. 2 CFR 200-331, the hyperlink is there, provides information to guide your determination and describes the characteristics of contractors versus subrecipients. The thing that is emphasized in the 2 CFR 200 and through auditors, and what we're all emphasizing, is the substance and purpose of the relationship is more important than the form of the agreement. Just because something is called a contract at the top of the agreement does not make it a contract. You have to consider the participatory effort of the entity you are engaging in the project. I'll just review a couple of brief characteristics. Again, paraphrased, I very much encourage you to go back and look at the CFR to make the determination. Contractors generally provide goods and services within their normal business operations, and they provide those similar goods and services to many different purchasers, normally in a competitive environment. They are providing goods or services that are ancillary to the award, that support the award to carry it out, but are not the primary purpose of the award. Contractors are not subject to the compliance requirements of your federal award as a result of your contract with a vendor. However, for subrecipients are characterized as having their performance measured in relation to whether the objectives of the project are met. You are essentially delegating objectives to another party. That party is the subrecipient. They are responsible for making programmatic decisions and have a say and provide guidance to the project. They are responsible for adhering to the requirements of the federal award that we may issue to you as a prime recipient. And they are essentially using the federal funds to carry out the purpose of the project. So as opposed to just providing goods or services for the benefit of the award recipient. And just remember, please, as you go through this process and make that decision, document your determination and maintain that information in your grant files. That's very important. And I'll just touch upon this. Should you find yourself receiving an award and you have identified subrecipients in your grant, there are 5 steps or components of the process of managing subawards that you need to be familiar with. These are your responsibility as a recipient, so I just encourage you to hang on to this as a resource and follow the information provided at these links. And if you have questions, again, please reach out. We've helped multiple recipients in the past, even this past year with this issue. Okay, so moving back to the contractual budget category, you're going to describe each contract and the services that will be performed. We only want you to describe contracts under the contract section, as we just discussed the difference. Subawards will be placed under the other budget category. So again, the other budget category, that's literally what it is called on the federal budget form. You will include subawards. In your budget narrative, you'll describe each subaward and the role of the subrecipient in carrying out the project objectives. You could include project printing costs or conference costs, rental costs, training costs under the other category. You'll also include participant support costs. I mean, all of these could have been bolded because we frequently see these in multi-state awards or proposal budgets. I highlighted subawards because, again, the emphasis that I just placed on making sure there's a determination there. And I highlighted participant support costs because there's often confusion, and this often is a source of correction in budgets that we have to make in the service as we're reviewing and issuing grant awards. Participant support costs include things like stipends or subsistence allowances, as I mentioned earlier, travel allowances or registration fees paid to or on behalf of recipients or trainees, not the employees of the organization. Not for the employees of the organization, in connection with conferences and training. And finally, I have a note, because that's the last budget category that I'm going to go over. That's the last one there is. Well, actually, there's indirect. That's the last direct budget category. Just a note about fiscal agents. For those of you who are familiar with fiscal agents, you'll understand these instructions here as a reminder. For those of you who aren't, a fiscal agent is a pass-through entity who will manage only the financial aspects of a grant award and delegates implementation of the project objectives to a subrecipient. So you may be the applicant and you receive the federal award, but all you're doing is drawdowns, processing invoices, and managing the financial aspects of the award. And you're passing off the objective and project implementation to people who have the technical, scientific, or otherwise expertise to do so. And again, it's this information provided here is what you will need to provide in your budget narrative. There's not a placeholder for fiscal agents. This happens. It's not super common. So if you are a fiscal agent, please describe that in the budget narrative. Just add a heading for it. And fulfill this information provided here. This is in the detailed instructions. All right, so indirect. Indirect expenses are those expenses of doing business that are not readily identified with the particular grant, project, or activity, but are necessary costs for the general operation of the organization. That's like a paraphrasing of the official definition, which most people understand, but some don't. If you're more of a programmatic person attending this training, maybe you don't know a lot about indirect. Hopefully you have financial resources, expertise in your organizations that can help with this, but I'm still going to go through it to help you understand at least the basics. Negotiated indirect cost rate agreements, or NICRAs. Your organization, as an applicant, must have a NICRA, an approved NICRA, to charge indirect cost on your award. Or if you do not have a NICRA, you may use the de minimis rate that's referenced in 2 CFR 200, which is currently 10%. A side note that may be changing, but for the grant proposals and budgets that are due by June 7th, it is 10%. And is applied to modified total direct costs. Modified total direct costs are defined in 2 CFR 200. Now, I'm going to go over a few of these things because that's a lot of sort of jargon, and if you're not familiar with it, it feels a little overwhelming. Your organization, if it has a NICRA, it will look something like this. It's sort of in letter or memo format from a federal agency with which your organization has an agreement. What you're going to want to pay attention to as you're trying to figure out which indirect costs apply to your direct costs, you're going to want to reference this. I'm going to show an example of this in the next 2 slides. So this is just a quick preview. This is an example of one where the base costs upon which indirect can be applied are described. This is another example of base costs upon which indirect can be applied. The rate is listed here, 29.52%. Up on this NICRA, it's listed as 29.21%. Everybody's NICRA is negotiated and approved a little bit differently. So it's important that you know your NICRA, your organization's NICRA. If you don't have a NICRA and you opt to use and elect to use the 10% de minimis rate, then there are allowable costs to which that rate can apply, allowable direct costs that are listed here in green. And there are costs in your budget that you cannot apply indirect, the 10% de minimis rate to, and those are listed here in a light shade of red, pink. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this. This is an example of the budget table in the template document that we've provided. This is an example of a budget if you were using your organization's NICRA. And let's just say this was your organization's NICRA. When you start filling out the budget table, and you determine, you're working on your budget, you determine what all of the budget categories are and the number that you're placing in each one of them. And for these, again, you're going to describe the details in the budget narrative. So the budget table just receives the final total. The only place we're asking you to break out sort of subtotals are in contracts and subawards, and those numbers will be off to the side. You're not going to include those numbers over here. You will put them here, but you will put the total contract value in the column labeled MSGP costs, MSCGP costs. And then same with subaward. You're going to identify each subaward. You can name the subawardees or contractors if you want. If you don't know and they'll be determined once your project starts, that's fine too. But your anticipated costs for those agreements will be placed over here. And then you can total up your direct costs right here in this column, but then you have to put a value in for indirect costs. First of all, we want you, in addition to placing it in the budget narrative, enter it in over here as quick reference. But you're going to do your indirect calculations over here on this side. This is kind of your worksheet to show us your math for your indirect charges. So once you get your costs listed, your direct costs listed, you're going to consult your NICRA. You're going to look at your base cost description and what it says. So this NICRA says that indirects can be charged to all direct costs except capital expenditures, and pass-through funds. Pass-through funds are normally defined as payments to participants. Whoops. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Payments to participants, participant support costs, which I mentioned, we just discussed, stipends to eligible recipients, subcontracts and subgrants. All of those costs are excluded. So when you start moving over costs in the indirect column, if they're eligible, move the cost over. So personnel, we can see is eligible. The salary is eligible. Move that total cost over. Fringe is eligible. Move that over. Travels are eligible. Supplies, equipment. They say direct costs and they don't exclude any of these items. So you can include them in your indirect cost calculation. Contracts are allowable, but subawards are not. So you can see where the total contracts are 25,000, there's your total there. You get to carry the 25,000 over here and include that in your indirect cost calculation. However, coming down here, you've proposed $18,000 in participant support costs, and you've proposed a total of 200,000 in subaward costs. 75,000 and 125 is 200,000. Unfortunately, neither of those are allowable according to your NICRA's base cost as applicable to or eligible for the indirect. So those are zero. Then you total this column and you come up with 82,095 compared to your total direct cost of 300,000. It's much less. You're applying your indirect rate, 29.21% to this allowable cost column, and you discover that your indirect is, or calculate that your indirect is 23,979. You carry that number over to the indirect cost column and you sum your direct cost and your indirect cost for your total expenses. And that's how that works if you are using your new organization's NICRA. Just a quick reminder, you will also see at the bottom of the budget template a space to tell us of this total 324,074, how much of that is relevant to sport fish restoration and how much is relevant to wildlife restoration. Well, in this example, let's just say we're funding the research project evaluating aquatic habitat for waterfowl and sport fish, however that's defined and described. And waterfowl and sport fish equally benefit from the work that you're performing. So you're basically just splitting this cost between these two multi-state funds, traditional sport fish restoration and traditional wildlife restoration. You don't have any relevance to R3, recruitment, retention, reactivation, so zero goes in that space. Okay, so the second example is if you are using the de minimis indirect rate and applying, if you are using de minimis, it is only applicable to total or modified total direct costs, which again are defined in 2 CFR 200, and I've paraphrased what is allowed and what is included and what is excluded when you do your indirect calculations. So in this case, I changed the budget up a little bit. It's not exactly the same as the previous budget. Some of the numbers are the same. So you have personnel, salary, fringe, benefits, travel, supplies, equipment. You have 2 contracts for a total value of $47,000. You have participant support costs at $28,000. You have 2 subawards. One of those subawards is $125,000. The other's estimated at $22,000 for a total of total under subawards of $148,000. And you have a total direct cost of $300,095. Now you need to calculate what goes in the indirect cost. You put your 10% over there since you're using de minimis. And now you're going to carry over costs from this column into the modified total direct cost base column so that you can calculate your indirect. As you go through this, you're looking at whatever's in the green. So yes, salaries and fringe are eligible, carry that cost over. Travel is eligible, carry that over. Supplies are eligible, carry that over. Now, equipment doesn't appear on this list. It does appear on the excluded list. You cannot carry equipment over. That gets a 0. Contractual services or contracts. They are on the included list. You can carry the full total amount of contracts over. Moving on down, participant support costs at 28,000. They're not, they are excluded rather, so they must stay off the modified total direct cost base. That's a 0. Now it gets tricky, little tricky. You have 2 subawards, one that's 125 and one that's 22. 2 CFR 200 says that MTDC excludes the portion of each subaward in excess of 25,000. So over here, what I'm showing is, yes, the total subaward is 125, but the amount allowable under MTDC is 25,000. So you're only carrying 25,000 of that subaward. For this subaward, if this subaward was 26,000, you could carry 25,000 over to this column for a total of 50,000. I should have put that in my example, and I apologize for that. But your total allowable of subawards would then be $50,000. However, in this case, you only get to count the 25,000 of this award, and since this one isn't even, oh wait, I did make that mistake. Silvana, we didn't catch that. I'm catching it as I'm talking about it. I apologize. We will correct this before we send the slide deck out. I think I'm just seeing if anybody's paying attention. So this 25,000 and this 22,000 would get carried over for 47,000 allowable. You would total this column up under MTDC. You would multiply this number by 10%, calculate your indirect, carry that value over to your indirect costs, sum up your direct and indirect costs for your total expenses. I'm gonna struggle with that one. I can't believe I missed that. And then what you're going to do again is you're going to consider whether these expenses, depending on your project and the purpose of the project and the activities you're carrying out, whether that should be distributed among 1, 2, or 3 of the funds available under multi-state. In this case, let's just say it is entirely an R3 project focused on hunting and shooting sports. It would all fit under R3 multi-state for wildlife restoration. I should have included, and probably will revise this too for the slide deck that we distribute. Let's say this R3 project involved also angler recruitment, in which case you might split costs between R3 multi-state wildlife restoration focused on hunting and shooting sports and traditional multi-state sport fish restoration funds that also cover R3 for anglers. So yeah, I apologize for that. I think I might be burning out. And I think I might be done. I am. I get to hand it over to Silvana now. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
You are done. I think participants are going to be done soon, too, because it's been a lot of information here. But you all are going to be able to go back to that information whenever you want when we share those slides with you guys. So just pretty quick, I have been mentioning the review teams. And so I'm just going to talk pretty quick about that process. So the review teams are built for each priority. As we mentioned, there are like 5 priorities. Each priority has a review team that is going to review those proposals that are submitted under that priority. We have not formed the review teams yet for this year. We'll be getting on that soon, but those review teams review and score the proposals and prepare a list with ranked proposals. Each review team will meet and discuss those proposals as well, and then this list will be sent to the National Grant Committee. Now, National Grant Committee has 8 directors, the state directors, and they have the final word almost the final word in the in that priority list. Then the priority list will go to the state directors for the final approval by AFWA before it goes to the Fish and Wildlife Service, which will do the final review and then the awarding. So also during the process of the review, the Office of Conservation Investment is involved during the month of August. They're going to look really into the compliance and make sure everything is in order before we submit those proposals in the grant solutions. Can you move to the next one, please? There we go. The review teams use the technical scoring criteria. Those criteria are as well in the AFWA website. You can click on that and see what each criteria is about. We have relevance, effective deliverables that address strategic priorities and help fish and wildlife agencies, the project objectives, methods, outcome and sustainability, monitoring and evaluation, project cost, guidelines, and then there are a few open-ended questions. These are comments that will be put together and sent to the applicants. Next. Not to scare you off, but if you never applied for the multi-state grants, there is some steps that you will need to follow if you make it through, and these are sam.gov. You have to register for that. You have to acquire a unique entity identifier. You have to sign up for the grant solutions, and then you have to do the ASAP registration, which is the system where you are going to get paid. Again, there's a lot of details about each of those in the following slides, and we're not going to go through those details. You can go back and read them. Karen will be available if you have any issues with getting any of those going on. I would say, Karen, I don't know, how long does it take to get through SAM or receive that UEI number?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question, but perhaps Lori, Danielle, or Nicole might. And we can provide some follow-up on that. But it's not an overnight thing. It doesn't happen in a day. So you definitely need to plan ahead. But just to follow up on what Silvana said, you need to worry about this if you are invited to submit a complete grant application in Grant Solutions. This isn't something you need to worry about before June 7th, but if you think there's a chance, you got June, July, August to prepare.
Yeah. So okay. I think it'll be good to start around July with some of those, not the grant solutions. I don't think so.
I don't know if Lori, Danielle, Nicole, you want to weigh in on a reasonable timeline. Can I advance through these then, Silvana? Yeah. Okay. So these are, again, just for your quick reference. Each one of them has a slide about the 4 registrations that Silvana mentioned. I'm just going to show them very briefly, and we will have these in the slide deck that we distribute. Okay. Back to you.
And these are just like the final reminders. June 7, the deadline, AFWA portal for application, only the full grant proposal and the budget, no federal forms. Please do not apply in Grant Solutions. You cannot actually apply in the Grant Solutions or grants.gov. Don't wait till the last minute to submit your application because something might go wrong with the website, or I don't know, something can go wrong with whatever. So please don't wait till the last minute. And no tracks for multi-state grants this year, or we are not using tracks anymore. And as I mentioned, the resources, this is the AFWA website, the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program page. It's a lot of information there, like everything you need answers on. If you go on the right side, you will see the timeline. Up here where it says register for the Multi-State Conservation Grant Program, training. I will be putting the link for this training, so you can go back and refer to the training again. And I will also include the slides here as well. On the right side, where you see the general information, NOFO is there, the guidelines are there, and you can use your little mouse around and show all the things. The criteria for the multi-year funding is all there. The scoring criteria is there. And that very last line, when the proposals, when the final list is approved, we post that here as well. And you can refer to that for the 2025 proposals.
Oh, and
Next.
can I also mention, Silvana, that this link up here, 2001 to present MSCGP grants database, this is where you want to explore what's been funded in the past, where the project abstracts that have been funded in the past and reports, if they've been completed and approved, are also found here.
Okay. Next. And we talked about the database already. You just can go and search by the organization. You can search by year. You can search by priority. We are trying to add a keyword search into the site as well, so it's easier.
And when you click on these tiles, that's where you'll get all the information about that project. So
yeah, there is
helpful.
Yeah, there's some information about the project, what the project was supposed to do. There's the outcomes, and then if the project had deliverables like reports or publications, they'll be there and you can download them. Okay.
So
next.
Can I interject real quick? This is Bettina.
Hi, Bettina.
Hi. Because I was going to interject something about AFLA's management assistance team, because I know historically there's been some concern about the amount of money that AFLA's management assistance team receives. So I won't go into detail about what's been discussed, but if there is this link, people can see that we are a fully funded multi-state grant program, everything. So that is listed in that link, that people can see how the grant funds our program.
Yeah.
Great. Then I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
So, and just to follow on from what Silvana just reviewed, there's also the other resource here is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a partner with a payer website that also has 2023 and 2024 grant abstracts loaded. So you can also scroll through and view projects here. Typically what we do is once the project report has been completed and approved, we then move those projects over to AFWA. AFWA the association has, though, uploaded the abstracts for 2024. So those are ready to assist you as well. And then finally, thank you everyone for bearing with us. If you have any questions now, tomorrow, throughout the application process, we're here to help. The association. Sorry, Silvana, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm going to go pretty quick since this is recorded, and I think recording does not record the chat and the questions and the answers in the chat. I am going to go pretty quick and read through them. We have 30 minutes, which is awesome. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, there was one question about for who has to benefit. Do we have to have a rep from each of 26 states, or will it just need to be applicable in at least 26 states? So when we say multi-state conservation grant program, it's about benefiting. It's not about representation. It depends on the grants, on the proposals as well. Like, I don't know. We had I think that question was from Cynthia. Cynthia, are you still there?
Yes, ma'am. And I think you actually did answer it in the chat for me as well. So thank you.
Okay. Everybody clear about this question? Okay. Can a regional association apply? We are referring to the AFWA regional associations, I believe. I think they are they have like NGO status, and the NGOs are eligible. So yes, regional associations can benefit as long as other eligibility criteria are checked.
Yes, and they have the Northeast Association and the other associations have all been applicants in Multistate in the past.
The other question, what is the average page length of funded project statements? You really cannot give like a definite answer on that. It depends on how many objectives you are going to include, but we always say that you are not going to be only applicant or proposal that will be reviewed between 100 and 120 to 120. I think the reviewers would like to stick with like not very, very long 20, 30 pages proposals. So just be on there, put yourself in their shoes, and then you can tell how much you want to write. Is the Regional AFWA Association eligible as an applicant if a project benefits all of its member states? Yes. Are personal salaries required for the grant? Most of our team does not intend to have salaries paid by grant. No, they're not. You can have all other categories like travel, research, contracts, awards, whatever the proposal will be include. You don't have to have personnel in the budget. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes, yeah. That is correct. Yep.
And then Danielle, match is not a requirement of these awards, but is voluntary match considered during review? We know that there is. Most of the grants require match. We do not require match. Now, if you come and say, well, I'm not going to charge this grant for the salaries, but I will use that as a match, won't make a big difference for us. It will not affect the scores, but it will help you like put more money on the ground, and as it does not count toward the scoring. Okay. Can the budget be used to hire an employee? Yes, I mean, salary is part of the budget, so you can use grant money for salaries. And then Lori put a link there. I think that directs you to the I think that takes you to the compensations and personal services, and you can find more information there about that. Does the travel have to occur within the budget period? If not, would a no-cost extension be needed to present results at a conference that occurs after the project's end date? Every single expense has to occur within the grant period, and we talked about that, and I think Karen was talking about timelines and all that. And yeah, I mean, I think Fish and Wildlife Service receives no cost extension requests, and I'll let Karen respond about that because that's part of their.
Yeah, and I mean, I touched upon this, I think, in the monitoring and evaluation section when I talked about significant developments. If you think you're gonna need a no-cost extension, you need to be communicating that to us early on, as soon as you're aware, and there has to be a justified reason for it. There has to be some delay beyond your control or some reason that you wanted or needed a cost extension. If you already know walking into this, you wrote a 1-year grant, but you think later, well, I'll just extend it so I can cover these additional costs later. That's not a good enough justification. There has to be an actual reason ahead of time, or you should be talking to us and proposing a multi-year project under the criteria that Silvana said was available on the AFWA website. So I don't want to drag that out any longer, but again, you really have to justify why a cost extension would be needed.
Another question was again related to the in-kind services. So when we're talking about the not including salaries in the grant, and if including them as in-kind services would be it would be a benefit to the scoring. So the question is, so it won't be an added benefit, but it's acceptable to include in-kind services. Yes, you can include it in the project statement. We try to not include it in the budget because once you get into like including it in the SF 425, SF 424, sorry, and then you have to report on it on SF 425. It just gets really complicated, but in the project statement, in the narrative, you can mention that you are using the resources and you have those in-kind services. Okay. Registration for SAM and ASAP relies heavily on the attentiveness of the recipient because it entails multiple steps, but I would give it a month to be safe. So 1 month, you probably should start sometime in August, end of July with all those. Can you speak to the additional steps or things to consider for a multi-year proposal? So part of the criteria, multi-state grants used to fund multi-year funding proposals. We stopped at some point because there was a year where there were no funding left for that year priorities because they were all obligated in the previous years. And that was not good because we might receive new priorities in the following year. So we stopped and moved from multi-year funding to the one-year funding. Couple years ago, we decided to go back, but work on some criteria for that. So we'll make sure that there is funding left if new priorities arise in the following years. And National Grants Committee came up with those criteria and they approved those criteria. So one of the main criteria is like only 25% of the funding will go to multi-year funding. The other criteria are inability to complete the outlined work with an annual funding cycle, ongoing and continuous efforts for which permanent dedicated capacity is needed. Merits of the project are broadly supported by technical review teams and the National Grants Committee. Proposals shall not request funding for more than 5 years. And then the 25%. So these are criteria. So I'm just going to say that we probably have no more than like 1 or 2 grants proposals out of 100 proposals approved for multi-year funding per year. It has to go through like multiple step process to be approved. And if you apply for a multi-year funding, we don't say don't. Everyone can apply for multi-year funding. We just want to make sure that your budget will be for each year. You will need to lay out the budget, the objectives, the approach. It's like writing 3 proposals in one proposal for those 3 or 5 years, whatever how many years you want to go for. The other thing is that if you submit a proposal for multi-year funding proposal and you say that if you cannot approve for multi-year, then I'll be okay with 1 year. I'll reapply again. But if I reapply and I don't get approved, I do have another plan. This first year that the funding has been spent for, the grant is not going to waste. There's going to be another way to support the proposal. So there's a lot into that. So just think about it before you put in for multi-year funding. the grant template say full proposal. Is the June 7th deadline just for the project statement portion that needs to be submitted to AFWA? Yes. Project statement and the budgets. That's it.
Just to reemphasize that, Silvana, it's the two templates, the grant proposal, which includes the project statement, and the budget narrative and table. Yep.
Is the allowable amount of the subawards that counts as MTDC increasing from 25,000 to 30,000? I think it's increasing to 50,000, but that's another issue.
Yeah, just to comment on that, some of you may be aware that 2 CFR 200 has some changes coming that aren't going into effect until after the June 7th deadline for this application. So all we can consider right now is what applies today. We will cross that bridge when we get to it. And if those are things you want to discuss, after the June 7th or when the new 2 CFR 200 requirements or thresholds go into place, into effect, I should say. We can discuss that later on.
Okay. Will letters of support be accepted with a grant proposal submission on the June 7th deadline? We do not request letters of support, but if you get selected and you are starting the proposal and then you're starting implementing your grant, and then you come and say, this state decided to not participate last minute, that's not going to be good. Just make sure that you have the buy-in from states before you start your proposal. Any other questions? I have reached the end of the questions on the chat. I'd like to make sure time, as long as our proposal that helps 26 states can be acceptable, or should our proposal need to address existing laws or situations that are the same in all 26 states? Okay. Cynthia, speak up, please.
Okay, that part of the question was actually not asked by me. It was asked by
Julie.
Sorry. No problem.
Sorry, Julie. Did I say?
Yes.
Did I pronounce it right?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Sorry to interrupt you to wrap up. Yeah, it is the first time to think about the multi-state grant, so I'm still confused. Yeah, of course, I need to read the RFA detail later, but I'm just curious. Anyway, the topic our team deal with is regarding the 26 state benefit. We can submit it, right? It is yeah. It doesn't need to be something special situation or, the laws, existed laws, or that are the same in all 26 states. Oh, do you understand what I mean?
Well, it's not. That's probably a specific example. Without more context, it would be difficult to answer the question. But we'll keep going back to the project. Whatever you're proposing to do and the outcome of the project must be a benefit to 26 or more states.
Okay. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
I might be able to just further reiterate again. I'm not part of the selection team, but since Miss Lee and I have a similar question, maybe I can provide my example. So for the study that we plan to propose and apply for a grant for is a fish health condition, And that condition has been reported in fish in more than 26 states. So although all 26 states won't necessarily even be aware that we're doing the study that we're doing, the results of our study will benefit fish health and fisheries management in those states. So then we would be allowed to write our proposal.
Yeah, and I would add to that so that's where you would, in the results and benefits, describe how the outcome of your project will continue to provide benefit. So I guess I would expect to see, were you going to share those results with all the states that are dealing with it? Or because if they don't know it exists, there's got to be some effort to reach out and ensure that those states have access.
Yes, ma'am.
26
yes,
or
ma'am.
more states have access to that resource
Yes,
that you're
Yes,
producing.
that's exactly what we would be doing. We would be sharing it far and wide to anybody who's willing to listen, anyone who's interested, because you know we are trying to be proactive in this particular endeavor. So yes, we would send it out.
Oh, okay. I understand now. Thank you for your example.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, it's hard without having the context.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Oh, got another one.
Seeking R3 funding for competitive shooting and training for 100 of our chapters, multi-state. Would we need a manager director per state?
So you're proposing to do training that would benefit multiple states. You know, it all just goes back to how you're describing the benefit and the intent to involve those states. We're not going to dictate that you have to have a manager or director in each state that's involved, but you have to describe to us, if you're going to say, for example, 29 states would benefit from this project, then we would need to know, and you should describe in your proposal how those 26 states will be the benefit of the information that you're providing or training that you're providing. How you manage that is you know, up to you within allowable cost, of course. If for any of these questions you're still feeling uncertain, you are absolutely welcome to reach out to me, and I can help walk through it one-on-one, have a conversation with you to help clarify if you're still uncertain. And I think I will also add, it's not on the training deck. I'm looking at it. We're all looking at it right now, but I will add my phone number also to this need assistance slide. As well as correct the indirect. Oh. All right, is that it?
I think.
Just one more question. I'm going to sound like a high school sophomore here. When will the slide deck be made available to everyone?
As soon as Karen fixes that.
I'll fix it this afternoon.
Again, I'll post that in the AFWA Multi-State Conservation Grant Program page where all the information is for the application and stuff. So it will be there, and the link will go there as well for the training.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Well, I think we're done. Yeah. Yes, please reach to us. We're pretty responsive, I think. So Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks everyone so much for your time and patient attention. This is a lot of information to cover in a short period of time.
It was great information. Thanks, Silvana. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.